Welcome to the People, Purpose, and Profits Business Coaching Podcast. This is Brian Buck, and my wonderful co-host is...
I'm Kat.
And we are here to talk to you about motivation. There's so much to talk about this one. This is probably the first of many episodes, but we're going to spend the next 30 minutes or so and just really talking about what that means for all of us entrepreneurs, whether we have a small or medium-sized business or a solopreneur that's like a coach or consultant. So, Kat, you want to talk a little bit about what made you want to talk about motivation today?
Well, I think mainly because sometimes I feel that we are really lacking that motivation. So finding it's crucial to our own business, to showing up the best way we possibly can show up. So I find that is a tool or a skill. And I really want to hear your take on it, but I do find it that it is a skill much more so than the feeling that should come up and people just like expect it for it to rise out of nowhere. But I find that if we practice being motivated, it takes a form on its own and it can pay dividends in your business and in your life as well.
Yeah, no, I agree, especially with the skill. And I would even say less than a skill as much of it is a choice. Because so many people believe that motivation is a feeling. I'll do it when I feel motivated. I don't feel motivated today. Well, you don't have to feel motivated. You have to choose to be motivated. And the most successful people do it anyways, regardless of how they feel. And so I think that's one of the things is to help unpack it is being motivated to do something is a choice. And it's something you could practice. And I probably even get down to it's a habit. How do you just do it despite? And you kind of have a do it anyways mentality.
Right. And you took that, out of my mouth. I was just going to say it is a habit. And it's the habit of bypassing your own feelings, especially when you're challenging your limitations and when you are afraid, because most people think that I'll be motivated when everything kind of aligns, everything is, going well, when I can't, I trust myself. But motivation is the opposite of that, is doing things in spite of how you're feeling. And I think we call that my goodness, I'm having a brain fart right now. I'll get back to you with that one.
Okay, yeah.
Cognitive dissonance. It's actually what it's called. And what we do, we actually create a little bit of a back and forth between the way we feel right now and the way we should feel, like the desired feeling. And if we know that it takes for us to show up energetic, but yet we're feeling down, we have to push. So we create that dissonance between how we're actually feeling and the way we should show up.
Yeah. Earlier, one of the things you made me think of when you bring in the element of fear, I don't know if motivation is the right word, but instinctively, as if we feel fear, we want to protect ourselves. So in a sense, we're kind of motivated to protect ourselves. And definitely when we're doing new things that we've never experienced before, or we're in the growth zone, fear is always going to be telling us, protect yourself, cover yourself, which could translate into motivation. It reminds me of, and I wish I could remember the name of this, and I try to find this video on it. I'll do some more searching, but it was a really interesting study on people who took heart medicine, and they found that heart medicine people, when they had heart issues, only 56% of them actually took the medicine on time every day and refilled it. And when they did exit interviews right after they got the diagnoses and said, how likely do you think you are to do this every day? And they said 100%. But the data shows 56%. And their point is, if people in a life or death situation, like they know if they don't do it, they risk death. If only 56% of them do it, what is it for everything else that we do that's optional?
Yeah.
And one of the things, they had a great story about this person who said, uh, he wasn't taking it. And the guy said, well, can you tell me why you weren't taking it? And he says, I have to take it because I'm going to die. He says, I didn't ask why you should take it. I said, why aren't you taking it? And he said, uh, well, I'm not some old man who has to take pills every day like my dad. And all of a sudden he realized he had two motivations that were in fighting with each other. One was take the pills to stay alive. Two, don't be like your dad and have to rely on pills the rest of your life. So I think that's another interesting piece about motivation, is realize when we have two competing motivations and then have to decide, well, which one's going to win. I
Right.
often coach, can you get a win-win? How do you not feel like an old guy who lives on pills forever and take your pills every day so you don't risk death? And this is one of the things that this person said, is they were able to realize that this isn't representative of the things that made him think his dad acted old. Like, he could still be active and he could still do things and have hobbies, and he could not act old and feeble where his dad did.
Right.
So I think understanding the motivations, and whether or not you call them motivations or drivers, it is interesting to look inside of ourselves to see what's actually happening. Because if we want two things, something's going to win all the time.
And what you're making me think of when you're talking about the drivers, we call it a stack. And the more reasons that you have for why you're doing something, the more likely you are that you're going to follow through that action. And for a lot of us, unfortunately, what causes us to move, it's pain, because we
Mm-hmm.
either do stuff because of pain or pleasure, and we love to think that we would do it more for pleasure, but unfortunately that's not what the statistics show. And based on
Mm-hmm.
my experience as well, I noticed that a lot more people do something when they have a gun to their head, when they're in a critical situation where they know that they can't feed their family, or they're facing a terminal illness, or whatever the scenario might be. That's when we get motivated to change things, to take action. And I want to invite our audience to take a look on how do they get motivated, or what motivates them to take action, and what gets in the way of them taking action. What are the excuses? What did they value more than taking that action that they know they should be taking?
Yeah, that reminds me, when I was at my corporate job before I got into coaching, you know, it was always a dream of mine to launch this business and serve people like I do. But I was comfortable, had a good paying job. There was a lot of things that I enjoyed about it. So I built my business when I got around to it. And it wasn't until the CEO changed our team and then I had some opportunity to focus on it that it became a must, and I started to really build it. So that's, I think, a key thing to really think about is, am I comfortable? And is that why I'm not taking action? Doesn't mean I was wrapped in fear, but I was like, it's good enough. And that good enough can really keep you in a place for too long. Eventually you look back and go, why did I spend 5 years in good enough? When you think about how many more people you could have impacted, and how much more joy do you have doing the things that you're wanting to do instead of the good enough. So I think a way to do that is to, how do you force yourself to have pain? Or you'll see many entrepreneurs say, is how do you get hungry?
Right. And, I have my own experiences where in the past, kind of thinking of my own journey in, self development. One of the things that put me on my butt and really made me, take a look and evaluate my life was, getting fired from a job for reasons I'm not going to go into because,
Hmm.
yeah. But it was unfair. And, when I walked away from that, I started asking myself bigger questions. And I started looking at the things that were happening in, my jobs, the previous jobs, and the one that I had just been let go of, from, was that I was a hard worker and I was putting everything, but I was not valued.
Hmm.
And it was for the first time in my life that I said, how could I value myself? How could I value
Hmm.
my time? How could I value what I know? How can I value what I am as a person? And that's, when things started shifting and I started understanding of how um small I played until that moment. And, it's interesting because I don't think up till that point I ever asked myself the questions or even saw myself doing more than just being an employee. Yeah,
Hmm.
maybe I fascinated, and we did have, a couple of businesses as, a family,
Hmm.
but it was not my own intention. It was kind of like follow through, like follow in the shoes of my parents.
Hmm.
And when I started like looking at the things that I even allowed others to tell me what I can and can't do, I started getting motivated to step into the person that I can truly be and actually explore that. Because that was the fun of it. Starting to get to
Yeah.
know myself, starting to look at the things that excited me, starting to see what was actually possible. And once you get like, bit by that bug, there's no turning back.
No, no, for sure. You also make me think of another thing that is important in this conversation about motivation, and that is the power of your why or your mission, or going right back to the point of the show, your purpose.
Yeah.
If you have a strong purpose or a strong why, that gets you through the times when you don't feel like doing anything. Because, I know that I'm going to take action because of the future customers or the existing clients, because I want to be able to serve them and help them. If I didn't have that purpose, then it comes down to, all right, what do I feel like? Like, especially if it's all
Mhm.
about, I want to be a millionaire. And you could be like, well, not today. I don't feel like being a millionaire. Because if it's your own or if it's about you, it's not as motivating.
And that's exactly the key. That's exactly it. And I've recognized that in myself, in my clients, and in all the people that I've talked to. The ones that really follow through and are really motivated, their focus is not on themselves, but more so on what service they provide
Yeah.
on others.
Yeah. And that could be either impact on individuals, impact to your community, impact to the world. Yeah. I think about, people who, I have a friend of mine who's an entrepreneur, and he wants to get to $10 million a year, not because he wants to roll around in the money like Scrooge McDuck. It's because he wants to be able to give more to their church and give more to their city. And, we interviewed Sean Q, and he was talking about why he wants to end poverty in the world, because that's the cause of so many societal ills. And so, not only through his business, but he has more money to give for charity to impact his community. So, there's so many things we could be able to do within this structure as an entrepreneur, and to have the freedom to move and adjust to make these impacts.
Right. And you know what, if people really need to take the time right now to, learn what motivates them and what makes them push through, because we are going to face challenges. We're not saying that, like I said in the beginning, motivation is not for those who are just ready or,
Mm.
they feel like it all the time. is for the people that get challenged every day, for the people who face adversity, for the people who never give up. And
Yeah.
you have a choice of whether or not you want to be one of them, or you want to be on the back seat and allow others to lead you. And there's nothing wrong with that either, but you just have to understand where you're at and what your desires are.
You know, this also makes me think, and I wish I could remember who it was, but it was a great TED talk. And there's a lot of material that backs us up outside of this individual. But it's kind of that whole willpower isn't everything. I think sometimes people think of motivation as willpower, but it really is about identity. You know, this person was talking about the story on someone wanted to give up sugar for a year, and they wanted to have a partner on that. And they said, well, why do you want to give up sugar for a year? Why? And he said, well, it's because I know it's not good for me, and I want to be healthier. And he says that means you want to make a choice in 366 days to go back to being unhealthy? No, I want to keep doing it. And they were saying that if you gave yourself the identity of a healthy person, you only had to make that decision once. I am a healthy person. And then all future decisions fit underneath that. Like, you don't have to think. You don't have to be like, does this have too much sugar? Can I eat sugar this week if I don't eat it? Like, you don't, we make too many decisions or too many things on how to be motivated, or oftentimes justify why we could do things, because we never take the time to say the identity of I'm a healthy person, or I'm an action taker regardless. And so I think come into that identity piece, and then you don't have to even really care about motivation. Because if you have the identity and the purpose, you're going to take action.
Absolutely.
And that's why people care about motivation, because they want to take action, but they're not. And then and then they blame motivation or kick themselves. But the real issue is you just don't have a strong enough purpose or identity behind it yet.
And I think, it's fair to say that there are people that still, do have that strong why or purpose, and still find themselves sometimes, lacking motivation. But because they've, rehearsed being in, that state of mind, and rehearsed showing up and despite on, of how they feel, it becomes second nature. And yes, they might have a small window where they're feeling like they just want to take a back seat. Ultimately they do take action, because skills and behavior, gets repeated. The one that gets ingrained in us, the ones that become habit, are the ones that we do all the time.
Yeah. Well, and that goes to what I coach so often, and I bring this up so many episodes, but it's just the power of choice and intention. If I am going to watch The Mandalorian, and maybe we'll watch both seasons, I'm doing that by choice. And I'm not going to blame lack of motivation, because I chose to chill out. Similarly, if I'm moving forward, that is also by choice. And I think that's a key thing. And yeah, there's other reasons why we don't take action, such as fear, or we don't have the capability, or we don't know how to do it, or maybe we don't even know what actions to take. But from a motivation perspective, I think if we recognize it's always a choice.
It truly is, and I think it's safe, especially when I think of motivation. Athletes come to mind a lot,
Mm.
because they're really an example of what it's like to be motivated and what happens when you are motivated. And so often we think that we're less talented. It's really interesting. People blame the fact that they're not motivated on talent.
Yeah.
And once again, we're coming back to that repetition, to getting into that state every single day. And that's really what gets them through, especially when they're hurting, or they're breaking a limb, or they're
Yeah.
they're getting injured. oftentimes we just see athletes when they're doing great, when they're in the spotlight, but most of us don't really recognize, how difficult it is to be in the trenches every single day, to take that action and to show up knowing that you may get injured, or that your whole life rides in certain moments in games.
Mm,
So, finding like that fire within you, it's crucial for how you show up and for your clients as a leader
mhm.
in your family unit and all aspects of life. And one thing I noticed, that if you practice motivation on one part of your life, it tends to bleed in everything else. Because if
Yeah,
I learn one thing is the way we do something is the way we do everything.
right. Right. Well, it makes me think. I recently heard this quote, and I probably heard it before, but I remembered it this time. And that is practice makes perfection. And I think so often we want the perfection. And of course, we both agree there's no such thing as perfection, but in the world of progress, but you've got to practice. Like all of these tremendous sports people, they practice a lot when they don't feel like it. They practice when it's hard and they're not good at stuff yet. Because once again, the growth zone is, okay, I don't know how to do this and I'm learning. And so often it's not, I mean, it might be motivation, but I think it's just the choice to persist, the choice to continue to practice, because you're going to eventually get to the point when that just becomes second nature. Because I always coach, like, if this is hard, it's only hard once. Because after you figured it out, then you're like, oh, yeah, I can totally do that. That's easy because you've gotten through it. And it's not going to be hard forever because you're
And
going to move on to something else.
and one thing I that came up, that you love to talk a lot about, is who you surround yourself with. Because I do find that that's really a huge part of how we show up and being motivated. If you're around people that constantly find excuses, that constantly find reasons why they're not doing things, or something is not possible, or they have a negative mindset, you're going to tend to do the same thing. But if you're around people who take action, who see possibilities, who take on opportunities, who do the work, then you're most likely to also be influenced by them as well.
I love that. And well, and I wished I knew these numbers, and I'll find them because I should start quoting them all the time because they're really good. But one of the things I always find with coaching is everyone has goals, hardly anyone has them written. Like, okay, first of all, you got to actually write the goals, but then you need to tell them to someone. And when you tell them to someone, you're more likely to do it. And when you say them out loud, you are more likely to do them. And when you schedule a follow up, an accountability follow up with someone, like each time you do these extra things, you are more likely to actually do it. And so when you think about, oh, accountability partners or accountability buddies or a coach or peers, that's going to take it a whole nother level. That adds a layer of an extra oomph. I don't know if it's necessarily motivation, but it's having that accountability also helps you move forward because you know you have to report it to someone else.
It is, you're motivated so you don't want to look bad.
Right, right, which is avoiding fear. I mean, avoiding pain.
Hmm.
And but all of those things will really help you propel yourself to keep doing, and it helps you continue to make that choice and propel you to make the habit of just always taking action regardless of feelings.
Yeah. And I when I started writing down my goals and I started voicing them, and then I started voicing them to one of my best friends, it was so interesting because it was almost like I was hearing this record play over and over again, because I would say
Yeah.
a goal and I'd be like, well, I haven't done it yet. But as soon as I heard myself say it again, I said, I don't want to say it one more time and not have it done. It's either I'm going to get in, like, and do it, do take the action, or I'm just not going to mention it anymore. So the
Right.
choice, was obvious, but sometimes we have to kind of listen to ourselves. We need to practice that self-awareness of, repeated patterns, repeated
Yep.
behaviors, and notice where the resistance is in order to be able to take action. And I think being motivated to just look for the answers is, a great first step.
Yeah, I love it. Well, we hope our audience is motivated to watch us on YouTube and listen to us on your podcatcher of choice. We also have a Facebook group where we discuss episodes with other audience members or with Kat and I. And we also have a Facebook page that just lets you know about our show. So we are super excited. Thank you for your time. And we look forward to hearing about how you handle motivation and how you can use that choice, that practice, that intention to do things regardless of how you feel. So thank you, everybody.
See you soon.